10,000 of you. I didn't know what to say. That thank you feels too small, a highlight reel feels too easy. So I decided to do something harder. I asked an AI to audit my own work about motivation, and then I'm going to tell you exactly what it found. The good, the uncomfortable, and the parts I need to fix. This is the video I probably should have made 2 years ago. 10,000 people decided that what I'm saying about motivation is worth their time. I want to be clear about what this channel has always been about. It's not about me. It's about the people in the back of every open space who are quietly checking out. The managers who want to do better but don't have the language. The HR directors who know the engagement scores are full but don't know where to pull the thread. So thank you, not for watching me, no, but for caring about this problem. And now let's get uncomfortable. Here's the thing about building a model and then teaching it for 7 years. You can develop blind spots. You have smooth answers for every objection, and you start to believe your own framing. And the critics either go away or you stop really listening. That's dangerous. So I did something I recommend to teams all the time. I asked for honest feedback from someone with no stake in the answer. I turned to Claude, Anthropic's AI assistant, the most trendy for now. I uploaded the MAU certification reference book, shared the full comparative analysis I've been building over the past year, and asked Claude to do exactly what a rigorous researcher would do: compare MAU against the full landscape of motivation science, classic and recent. And don't be polite about the gaps. I want to be transparent about this. Claude is an AI. It doesn't experience motivation, doesn't manage teams, and can't validate a model through lived experience. But it can synthesize a large body of academic literature, identify patterns, and surface contradictions remarkably well. What came back was a thorough, structured, and in several places, genuinely challenging analysis. This video is my honest response. The uncomfortable truth. We have over 140 definitions of motivation in the academic literature, a century of research, and yet Gallup tells us only 13% of European employees are fully engaged at work. Why? Because most classic theories were built to explain one person in a controlled setting, often in a mid-century factory. They were never designed for modern organization where employees, freelancers, contractors, and insourced workers all sit on the same table. Taylor, carrot and stick, worked for assembly lines, produced alienation. Mao keeps the idea that material conditions matter, but doesn't stop there. Maslow hierarchy, widely known, weakly validated. The rigid sequence doesn't match reality. People sacrifice security for meaning all the time. Mao uses layers, but refused the strict hierarchy. Herzberg, this one I genuinely love, and Mao has a lot of it. Hygiene factors prevent dissatisfaction. Motivator create engagement. The gap. Herzberg never asked how this plays out at the team or organizational level. Mao is, in many ways, Herzberg done at 3 scales simultaneously. Ducey and Ryan, self-determination theory, the most validated framework in the field. Autonomy, competence, relatedness. A meta-analysis of 119,000 participants confirms it predicts engagement and reduces burnout. Mao translates these needs into concrete levers at 3 organizational levels. SDT explains why. Mao tells you where to act. There's complementary. Mao does three things no classic model does together. One, it rates motivation as systemic, not individual. Motivation circulates. It's contagious in both directions. You cannot fix individual motivation without looking at the team and organizational context it lives in. Two, it separates motivation from mobilization. Motivation is invisible. It lives in the black box of someone's psychology. Manager can't access it. What they can do is shape the condition that makes mobilization more likely. This reframe is liberating. It moves management from psychology to architecture. Three, it works at three levels simultaneously: individual, team, and organization, through the 4x3 matrix. Row 1 is the foundation: safety, incentives, resources. No psychological safety, no fair rewards, no adequate tools, everything else collapses. Row 2 is the social zone, where managers have the most direct leverage: autonomy, collaboration, cooperation. Row 3 is development, competence, creativity, innovation, the transition from compliance to genuine engagement. Row 4 is integration, confidence, purpose, culture, where work becomes identity. And the key dynamic: positive contagion. Autonomy feeds collaboration, collaboration enables cooperation, competence enables creativity. One well-targeted intervention ripples across the system. Claude identified real gaps. I'm going to take them seriously. Gap 1: burnout has no real home in Mao. The GDR model maps two parallel processes. High demands without resources lead to burnout. High resources with manageable demands generate engagement. Mao is a growth model. It diagnoses the absence of motivation well. It doesn't have a developed framework for the presence of exhaustion. These are different problems that need different interventions. You cannot mobilize a depleted system. You have to restore it first. That's a gap. GDR also introduced job crafting, the idea that individuals can proactively reshape their own context without waiting for the manager to act. This bottom-up dimension of motivation is under-theorized in Mao. The individual is not only a receiver of conditions, they're also an agent. Gap 2: the leadership link is deliberately vague, and that's both a choice and a limit. Mao tells you what a manager should produce: an ecosystem that enables mobilization. It says much less about who a leader needs to be to produce it, or which leadership style gets the most efficiently. This is partially deliberate. When Mao is deployed inside an organization, that organization often already has a leadership model in place, its own framework, its own language, its own investment in a particular approach. So explicitly tying Mao to transformational leadership or servant leadership or any specific style could create friction with what's already there. The choice was to remain leadership style agnostic, so that Mao work alongside whatever model the company already uses. That's a pragmatic decision, but it has a cost. The cost is that Mao doesn't tell you what happens when the existing leadership culture directly contradicts what the matrix requires. A row 2 that asks for autonomy and collaboration cannot function in a culture of micromanagement and fear, no matter how well designed the matrix interventions are. The model needs to be more explicit about the minimum leadership conditions required for it to work, without necessarily imposing a specific leadership doctrine. And there are specific connections worth naming. psychological safety. Edmondson's work, confirmed by Google's Project Aristotle, is the strongest single predictor of team performance. It's currently treated as one cell in row one. It deserves to be framed as the master key that unlocks the entire matrix. So that's not a leadership style, it's a prerequisite. Gap 3, independent empirical validation. Mao drowns on validated components. Deci, Edmondson, Hackman, Gallup, but the integrated model itself hasn't been tested independently in controlled studies. This is typical of practitioner frameworks, but I should be honest, Mao is supported by research on his building blocks, not on the model as a whole. That's something I intend to change. Gap 4, non-employee profiles are underdeveloped. Mao claims to apply to all profiles. The systemic logic holds. Everyone in the system influences everyone else. But a freelancer's relationship to security is fundamentally different from a salaried employee. Contractor may not access the culture levers of row 4. An insourced worker is navigating two organizational systems simultaneously with conflicting loyalties. We haven't formalized these adaptations. We need to. Gap 5, power dynamics and resistance. Mao is built on the assumption of good faith and that everyone wants the system to work. That's often true, but it's not always true. Some actors benefit from disengagement. Some structures reproduce passively by design. A complete model needs to acknowledge structural resistance, not just individual unmotivation. Briefly, the two frameworks Claude surfaced that aren't competing with Mao, but genuinely extended for specific situations. Laloux Teal organizations. Self-management, wholeness, evolutionary purpose, row 4 of Mao expressed at its maximum. The difference? Laloux describes a full organizational transformation. Mao gives you levers wherever you are right now. Laloux shows the destination. Mao helps you move. Organizational constellation. A facilitation method derived from Hellinger's family constellations. When every rational tool, survey, workshop, interviews has failed to explain a persistent dysfunction, constellations can surface invisible systemic dynamics, historical loyalties, unresolved tensions, structural imbalances. I'll be honest about the limits here. Scientific validation is weak. The risk of practitioner bias or, in worst cases, manipulative dynamics is real. The Miviludes in France has flagged certain applications as potentially concerning. My position, a powerful complement to Mao in specific stuck situations with a skilled, humble practitioner and a clearly professional frame, not a substitute for structural change, After all of that, here's what Claude audit actually confirmed about Mao. And I say this with more confidence now, not less. The three-lever architecture is genuinely rare. No other operational model simultaneously addresses the individual, the team, and the organization in a single current framework. SDT works at the individual level. Hackman works at the team level. Most culture frameworks keep the individual entirely. Mao is the only model I know that reads motivation as a force that circulates across levels and tells you where to intervene at each one. The motivation, mobilization distinctions changed how managers think. When a manager understands that their job is not to motivate people, that motivation is a black box they'll never access. Something shifts. Their jobs becomes designing conditions. That's observable, measurable, and actionable. It moves management from psychology to architecture. The temporal dimension is almost unique. dopamine, cortisol, serotonin, short-term excitement, pressure-driven urgency, slow-burning belonging. Most models ignore time entirely. Mao builds temporal intelligence into its architecture, knowing when to stimulate, when to protect, and when to consolidate is as important as knowing what to activate. Shared responsibility, hence the blame cycle. Disengagement stops being the individual's fault or the manager's failure. It's become a system signal. Something in the architecture is missing or misaligned. That reframe is productive in a way that individual blame never is. The feedback distinction is immediately actionable. Functional feedback is about result, factual, frequent, reliable. Social feedback is about recognition, appropriate, proportional, and positive. Confusing the two is one of the most common and costly mistakes in organizational life. Mao gives manager a clear vocabulary and practice for both. Here's what this analysis made clearer to me than any milestone or metrics could. Mao is not a finished theory. It's a living framework, built to be challenged, refined, and updated as the world of work changes. The gaps Claude identified are real. Burnout, leadership connection, validation question, non-employee profiles, power dynamics. These are not small problems, but they are solvable ones. And naming them honestly, publicly, is the first step towards solving them. Here's what I know after 7 years applying this for dozens of organizations. When a manager stops trying to motivate people and starts designing the condition for mobilization, something changes. When a team understands that its engagement is a shared responsibility, something changes. When an organization reads disengagement as a system signal rather than an individual deficiency, something's changed. That's not magic. It takes time, consistency, and the courage to keep asking uncomfortable questions, including about your own model. This video was my gift to you and to myself, an honest checking at a real milestone. A reminder that growth requires feedback, and that the most useful feedback is the kind that names what you haven't seen yet. The full comparative analysis, all 7,000 words written with Claude helps and reviewed by me, is linked in the description. I stand behind every line of it, including the uncomfortable ones. Comments are open, I read them, and occasionally they become the starting point of the next video. Thank you. Thank you for being part of the 10,000. If this video was useful for you, share it with one manager who's trying to figure out why their team is disengaged. Not to sell them a model, but to give them a better question to ask. Full analysis in the description. Subscribe if you haven't. See you next time. And don't forget, boost the system.